Welcome to March Untangled with me, Emma Potter. I have... Hello and welcome to March Untangled. My name's Emma Potter and I designed this series to kind of get a better look at each month by trying to slow down and notice stuff. I'm very guilty of rushing around and not noticing anything, and so I have specifically set myself the challenge for 2018 to notice the good in every single month. So let's get to it and untangle the month of March. I like the way that sounds. Let's get started. It has been a crazy month here in England. First of all, it looked like this. And then it looked like this. And then it looked like this. It does not know whether it's coming or going. It has been insane. We have had all the weather in this 1 month. And I tell you what, not just the weather, it's been a really crazy month. Really in all aspects. Not just the weather. I always find March to be one of those big months in the calendar. I feel like it's the true end of the year and beginning of the year. Spring equinox for me it fits a bit more with me to be the actual end of the year, because with spring equinox on the 20th of March, that's the start of spring, and it is currently bucketing down with rain here. It has been since we got up this morning. The light is very weird. It's really dark outside and I've got my lights on in here and it's really bright, so it seems kind of artificial, so I do apologise for that. But I was talking about the craziness of this month. So much happened in this month. We've had a full moon and a new moon, and we've got another full moon on the 31st, on Saturday. And this second full moon will be a blue moon because it's the second of the month. But it is also a blue moon taking place whilst Mercury is in retrograde. And there is going to be some seriously strange stuff going on, I think. Already, Mercury went into retrograde March the 22nd, 23rd, depending on where you live in the world. And we've had to have a new boiler installed. It was installed yesterday. That has not gone well, the installation. The gearbox went in Darren's car. And I've never even heard of a gearbox going in an old banger, let alone a fairly new Volvo. I thought Volvos were indestructible. I thought that in the event of the end of the world, only cockroaches and Volvos would be left. But no, his gearbox is gone and it's going to cost like 50 billion quid to fix it. It was a bit touch and go about whether we were going to actually fix it or not. And 3 weeks in the garage. So we are down to one car at the moment. And that means that Darren has to take the car to work and I have to walk to pick Betsy up from school, which I don't mind. It's about a 25-minute walk. And I take Tilly with me. About halfway back, Tilly gets a bit huffy, a bit tired. She's not enjoying it so much. I think because it's mainly pavement, and we do walk across some playing fields, so she gets to go off the lead and go for a wee and stuff. But Betsy doesn't mind it either. I take her scooter with me and she scoots home. But today it's tipping down. Not entirely sure how that's going to go. I thought maybe the rain would stop by now, but nope, hasn't stopped. It really is pouring down. So yeah, we've just been Mercury retrograded so much. I can't quite believe it. I don't know if stuff like that's happening to you. I wrote about it on Instagram and lots of people were saying, oh, that's why this is broken, or I've dropped my phone and smashed my screen and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's making itself known because it's in Aries as well, and fiery Aries and Mercury in retrograde, they kind of go together to create devilish energy for us. That's the other thing I love about March, the transition from the last sign of the zodiac, Pisces, which is all dreamy and romantic and watery. And then you get the spring equinox, and on the same day, the energy shifts from Pisces energy to Aries energy, which is fiery and new, the first sign of the zodiac. And it's like a month of two halves, I think. And I think this year it's been especially noticeable because of the Mercury in retrograde, but also because we've got this second full moon coming up on the 31st. It's been challenging. Challenging. Meanwhile, I had quite a good month. I have to say that I had made a decision that March was going to be, my word for the month is open. And I made a conscious decision that I was going to open back up again and start feeling like some kind of level of excitement about things that I'd kind of lost excitement for, if that makes sense. I'm not deliberately trying to be vague, but there were lots of things that, I kind of closed my heart to. For instance, the crochet community, the online community, the Instagram community, anything to do with yarn, really. I was ticking over and I was still doing a lot, but my heart really wasn't massively into it. And when I launched the Caravan of Love shawl at the beginning of March, I used that as a stepping point to stepping over from being very closed to being very open again. And I immediately felt the shift of it. It coincided with International Women's Day as well, and I loved how everything was very synchronised because I started the Crochet Girl Gang on Instagram on International Women's Day 2 years previously, and lots of people had been messaging me and asking me why I wasn't posting on Crochet Girl Gang anymore, and my heart just really wasn't in it. I'll be honest, and I did reply to people and say, my heart's really not in at the moment. I'm having a break and, I'll be back. But to be honest, I didn't know when I was going to be back. I didn't feel any overwhelming desire to go back to it for a lot of that time. And then, at the beginning of March, it just all sort of happened at the same time. And now I'm posting again on the Crochet Girl Gang every day, and it's because it all kind of happened together at the beginning of March, it feels really good. And I feel really good and really positive about everything, really. A complete shift around. I think I said to you in February's podcast that I hadn't been working with my tarot cards because I kept pulling the Tower. Well, now I realise that the reason I kept pulling the Tower was because the cards were trying to tell me that I had to let that go. I needed to let all of the closed off feelings go and open up. And so I did. And everything's like, la. It really is. You make this decision to open up and everything else just falls into place, I think. It's also interesting that at the end of last year, I drew a tarot card for each month. And I've kept that in my journal. And I hadn't looked at it really because I'd gone off my tarot cards. And I looked at it in March, and the card for March was the Tower. And it made me laugh so much when I saw it because I didn't know prior to making the decision to open up and to make all of these changes. And of course, with tarot cards, and especially with the Tower, it's usually thought of as being a really negative card. It means great change. But we always naturally assume that great change is going to be negative, and quite often it's not. And I feel like the Tower, whilst it was a card that had been bugging me, I was going to say something else and it made me giggle. I was going to say dogging me, but I think that's something else entirely. I've composed myself. Because the Tower had been bugging me for quite some time. I think I remember pulling those 12 cards and being really grumpy about the Tower turning up again. But actually it is very well placed, I think. There's been a massive change here and a change for the better, and I'm really pleased about it. I wonder how your marches have gone. I bet they've been as crazy as everyone else's. Yeah. Luckily, I've got some great things to talk to you about. On this episode, I just wanted to talk to you about two audio podcasts that I listen to an awful lot, and I think that you will like them an awful lot too. The first one is, I found this lady, her name is Sarah Blondin, and I found her on the Insight Timer app that I told you about. Her podcast, I think, is called Live Awake, and it's a series of short meditations in which she talks, and they are the most magical, dreamy things you could ever listen to. I am not kidding. You must listen to her. She's on the Insight Timer app. She's on YouTube, I believe, as either Live Awake or Sarah Blondin, and I think she's also on like the podcasty bit on iTunes, is it? I don't know where my phone just has a podcast button, and when I click on it they all just come up in there. She's on there as well. She's got a particularly good one that I probably listened to about probably 15 or 20 times already, and I think that this particular podcast is the one that really helped me to open up again and let go of lots of negativity. And it's her podcast on, I think it's called, it's something to do with letting go. I'm not entirely sure if it is the art of letting go, or let me just check. It's my most played in my bookmarks on the Insight Timer. It's called Healing Through Letting Go, and wow, she says just the most beautiful things, and her words really heal. It was almost like, the first time I listened to it, it was almost like she knew what was going on inside my head. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. You will love it. Not only are her words beautiful, but her voice is beautiful, and the way that she speaks and the music that she has in the background. And she talks, it's almost like she's reading a poem. That's how beautiful it is. And then she says, now close your eyes, and she kind of does like a meditation at the end. It's very relaxing and very inspiring, and I listen to her all the time. You must too. You will love her, I am sure. Felt like I was just talking and talking and talking. The other podcast that I highly, highly recommend is, I think, only available on iTunes, and it's called Tarot for the Wild Soul with Lindsay Mack. And I know there are those of you that aren't particularly into tarot, but she has a monthly medicine episode that she releases at the end of every month for the following month. And she does talk about tarot because that is her speciality. But she talks about everything. She talks about how the energy of a month, how a month's going to go. She talks about astrology, moons. She brings all sorts of elements in to kind of give you an overview of how the month coming up is going to be. She does also draw cards or talk about the cards that are associated with those months, but she does it in such a natural and, what word can I use to describe her? Oh, it's going to bug me now. Knowledgeable. She does it in such a natural and knowledgeable way. And she doesn't talk about tarot in a fortune telling kind of way, which I really appreciate, because I don't use tarot in a fortune telling kind of way. I use tarot as a way to help me understand myself. I think of the tarot cards as being mirrors, and when you pull a tarot card, it's mirroring back to you your current energy. And she talks in that way, and it just gives you a really nice flavour of the month. And sometimes they're really well done. And she also has a really nice voice, and you could listen to her forever. She does lots of other podcasts as well, but her monthly medicine ones are really good. Sometimes I will miss one, and I will listen to it either halfway through a month or at the end of the month that she's talking about, and it will be like, oh yeah, it has been like that. So, Lindsay Mack, her name is, and her podcast is called Tarot for the Wild Soul. I think her website is Wild Soul Healing. It's very good. I highly recommend both of those. I think that you will enjoy them. I like to listen to podcasts quite a lot if I'm just sitting and knitting or working. Sometimes I find an audio podcast much easier to listen to than watching podcasts on YouTube, because you can just really concentrate on what you're doing but still have somebody, saying soothing nice words in your ear. It's funny really, because Darren listens to a lot of podcasts as well, but he listens to all the Boise podcasts. There's quite a lot of Boise podcasts, isn't there? He likes that, I can't remember his name now. I've talked about him before. No, it's not going to come to me. Joe Rogan. It is going to come to me. It finally came to me. Yeah, he listens to that Joe Rogan podcast. But Joe Rogan does often have spiritual, magical, mystical themes. Because quite often I'll talk to Darren about something that I've heard in a podcast, and he'll have heard a similar thing on Joe Rogan's podcast. So it's almost like Joe Rogan's doing it for the boys, and then our girls, Lindsay and Sarah, are doing it for the girls. There are loads of others. I'm sure that you could recommend some great podcasts to me as well, but they're the two that I would like to recommend to you for March. So I've already mentioned tarot quite a lot in this episode. Quite a few people had asked me to talk about tarot a bit more, and it was a bit difficult in January and February's episodes because I hadn't touched my tarot cards. But I am back with my tarot cards. Well, I'm back with one particular deck. So what I thought I'd do is talk to you about this particular deck, and maybe talk about tarot during the course of the year in terms of the different decks, but also in terms of how I use the tarot and what the tarot means to me. I just mentioned that I don't use tarot in a fortune telling kind of way. I use it as a way to reflect back how I'm feeling. The reason that I find it accurate and helpful and in many ways quite essential to journaling. I probably should talk about my journaling practice as well. Maybe in next month's episode I will. But I journal a lot every day. And the way that I journal is that I just write for a start, but I also do use tarot cards and oracle cards as sort of guides to help me understand myself and what's going on a bit better. I think that it's often quite hard to really pinpoint what's going on sometimes. And I'll use the example of me constantly getting the Tower card as an example, because I felt like I had got over, a whole load of ugliness that happened last year. And, in myself on a day-to-day basis, I felt quite happy and, everything was fine. But I kept pulling this Tower card, and it really got on my nerves. I got really annoyed about it. I got quite sad about it. And, but now I feel like I really have let go. I realise why that card was coming up. I think the cards come up for you to mirror your energy, and if you're not aware of an energy within yourself, like I wasn't aware really that I was still holding on quite tightly to that hurt. And if you listen to that Sarah Blondin podcast about healing through letting go, she says that, I want to hold on to it. I want to feel righteous about it. And I want people to know that I've been through a lot, and therefore I have a right to be angry and hold on to anger. And that actually was how I was feeling, and I just was kidding myself that I wasn't feeling like that. And so I think that I do think that they're powerful. I just find them magical and so inspiring. The deck that I picked up, and the deck I'm going to talk to you about today, it's quite an interesting deck with a great story. It is called the Aquarian Tarot. And this is the first tarot deck I bought. I used to follow a really cool, like, hippie shop, like a Californian hippie shop on Instagram years and years ago, when Instagram first started, really. And they used to have lots of really cool, garish 1960s and 70s crochet in their shop, which is why I followed them. And then one day they posted a picture of the Aquarian Tarot, and they obviously had got a deck into their shop and they were selling it. Well, their shop was in California and this deck looked pretty, you know, busted. Well loved, and I didn't really want to get. I'm all for secondhand decks, but I don't ever really want to buy a deck or receive a deck if I don't know the history of the previous owner, because I believe that the decks are kind of charged with energy. And so I went searching for the Aquarian Tarot, and it's one of the tarot decks that is printed by US Games, and so it's quite widely available. And I managed to get, I think I got it on Amazon. Anyway, so I've had this deck for probably 4 or 5 years, and she is my favourite. This deck is the deck that most gels with me. And if you're an owner of tarot decks, I know a lot of you are actually, because you leave me comments, and so I know that you know what I'm talking about when I say that you, especially if you have more than one tarot deck, you can feel different things for different decks, and they will show themselves to you in different ways. And this deck has always felt very, very positive, very much like me. When I first got it, I used to sleep with it under my pillow, and because they say that is a way of getting your energy into the deck. And I think probably because I had this deck for 2 or 3 years before I ever bought another deck, these kind of are my sort of main cards. This is the deck that sits by my bed, and one day this month, the box is quite battered. I must try and find a nice bag to put them in, but the box is quite battered, and it had been kicked around by the side of my bed, and a card was poking out the top, and I saw it and I thought, oh, the deck's trying to tell me that I need to come back to it. It's like this little card peeking out the top of the deck, which made me reach for the deck and put the card back and shut the box. And I kept thinking about that all day. It really made me chuckle. And later on that day, I decided to do it. In fact, I think it was on Spring Equinox? Oh, it may well have been. So I decided to do a past, present, future spread. And I knew for a fact that the card that was poking out the top was going to be in my past, present, future spread. And sure enough, it was. Little things like that happen quite often, and it just makes you smile, and it just makes you realise that the faith that you have in these cards' ability to be able to help you to understand yourself a little bit better, it's a good faith to have. The cards are designed by David Palladino, I think it's Palladini. Yeah, David Palladini. And they were first launched in 1970. So they are very retro, and they have got like a really 1970s colour theme. There's sort of oranges and browns, and I really like the Art Deco imagery. some of the cards I absolutely love. My favourite card in the deck is the... I will do a close-up so that you can see some of the cards in the deck for yourself. But let me show you my favourite card. I think it would make a really great poster. My favourite card is the Moon. And I believe the Moon is the card of Pisces. So we've been under this Moon energy for most of the month. But I absolutely love that card. And you know, I've never pulled that card in this deck. And that's the other thing that you will find, especially if you have multiple decks, but even if you just have the one deck, there are so many cards in this deck that I've never pulled. And I've been pulling cards from it, you know, pretty much daily for years. There are cards that I often, very often pull. And it just makes me smile. It's like they're my cards. This guy I get all the time. He's a very positive card actually, but I just love his funny face. It's the Nine of Cups. Just look at his jolly face. This guy is, I pulled this in my present position for my past, present and future card draw. But just look at his jolly face. He is a very happy man indeed. And this is the card of happiness and contentment. And I pull it quite a lot from this deck. But when I go through it, it makes me realise that there are so many of the cards in here that I have never pulled. And I just find it fascinating. I find it fascinating. These cards are definitely one of those decks that it's part of me. The Sun is also very groovy. Yeah, it really feels like my deck. They feel like my cards. So the way that I use them is I will be writing in my journal and I will do a daily draw, and that is just pulling one card from the deck, and the daily draw is just, usually I'm thinking, you know, in my head when I'm pulling the card, I'm thinking, oh, tell me what I need to know, or give me some advice for the day. And they're usually pretty accurate. I've had situations where I would do a new moon tarot spread, and it would be, I would just pull up lots of cards of conflict and wonder what's going on, because I couldn't feel any conflict going on in my life. And then like 2 days later, something, you know, nightmarish happens. Sometimes I can see the fortune telling side of the cards. But I think that is just because what happens to us in our life is a result of how we feel and the energy that we're giving out. And that's why it can be used in a fortune-telling way. But sometimes with situations like that where I've had no idea that conflict is coming, and then it comes, it is a bit of a shocker. I don't know. I was just about to tell you how many tarot decks I've got, but I don't know. I've probably got about 5 or 6. I've got one that I never use. I don't get on with. It doesn't gel with me at all. And I just picked up, at Christmas time, I picked up a set of Rider-Waite because I didn't have a Rider-Waite deck. And when you're learning about tarot, and I have to look up all of my cards. Yeah, I have to look up the meanings of a lot of cards. I do, because like I say, you do tend to get the same cards over and over again. I know straight away the meanings of a lot of cards, but I'm in no way good at interpreting the cards immediately that I see them. Although I feel like I'm getting, 5 years down the line, I feel like I'm getting a bit better at it. And I have no intention of ever doing tarot readings. I enjoy tarot on a personal level. But when you look up the meanings of tarot cards, usually, in most cases, the meaning will be based on the Rider-Waite deck. And I felt that it was important to have that deck so that I could kind of know what was going on. My battery's going to run out. Oh, and I've just put the oven on so that I can have some food, because my tummy is rumbling quite a bit. Hold on, let me just go and change the battery. I'm not done with you yet. So that is one of my tarot stories. I hope you found it interesting. I'd love to know if you have a tarot deck or multiple tarot decks, and how you use yours. So do tell me. Or if you've got any advice of how I can further use mine, I would be most interested. There are a couple of other things I wanted to talk to you about. I've decided that I'm going to work on the garden more this year. I didn't really work on it last year, mainly for the reason that our garden is really long, really big. And that's not a reflection of the size of our house. It's just that when Victorian cottages were built in the UK, they often had very long, very narrow gardens to go with them. I think you'll find that anywhere in the UK, that they tend to go together, Victorian cottages, terraced cottages in particular, and really long gardens. And it's quite an overwhelming garden. I have done bits of it, and not last year, the year before, we had a new patio laid, so it gave the garden a bit more structure. But this year I really want to get into doing some serious planting, and so I bought a couple of books about gardening. And I'd seen this one I like Selena Lake. I've got a couple of her other books, but this is just on garden style. So it's kind of really more about styling your garden rather than planting your garden. But she does have some good tips on good flowers to use, good perennials to use, and lots and lots of inspiration. It is a bit like you're reading it there and you're like, oh, I want my garden to look like that. I want it to look exactly like that. I think that these kind of jungly looking gardens are just gorgeous. I want that kind of thing. But with just me doing the garden, because Darren has no interest whatsoever, with just me doing the garden, I think that probably would be quite difficult. But I'm going to go for it this year. So I got that book, which is nice. But then in terms of planting, and this book, it's quite funny really, because it kind of just shows you the kind of attitude that I have towards gardening. Yeah. A garden from scratch in a year. I don't think so, Emma. Nice try, but I don't think so. This book, though, is a lot more structured about planting. And you get little planting diagrams, which I find really useful, and loads of advice on how to start your garden, and the fact that you can start your garden from scratch in a year at any time of the year. So I've been really swatting up quite a lot on that. I'm really going to try and get into gardening this year. I have a mixed track record with it, though. I find that I will tend to just plant things in, and usually I'm very traditional English country garden orientated. I like hydrangeas and fuchsias and roses, and so everything in my garden, I will buy hydrangeas and I will plant them in, and they'll either work or they won't work. And then I'll be like, oh, a hydrangea doesn't work in that place, and then try something else in that place, or move the hydrangea and see if it works in a different place. And yeah, I think that's probably, it's a bit hit and miss, and I don't really think it's the right attitude to have towards my garden. I have got lots of herbs in the garden, and in fact I did have to cut the sage back because it was completely taking over. I could have made like a gazillion sage smudge sticks, but I didn't. So yeah, gardening is going to happen this year. I'll be talking to you a lot about that in the coming episodes. But also, I got my Merkaba box for this month, and this month's box had an earth theme. I love that picture. And it's all about working with the earth element. And the just the most amazing thing in the box was this book, The Handmade Apothecary. I love that word, apothecary. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Anyway, once you start thinking about a word too much, it just goes really weird, doesn't it, in your head? This, again, is another amazing book all about herbs and plants that you should have in your garden so that you can create healing balms and drinks and tinctures. I'm super, super into this. Oh, hold on. So I'm on a timer now because I just put my falafels in the oven. I'm having falafels for lunch. I am. So my earth box is fabulous. Again, I got that book, which I love. It came with a really beautiful crystal, and Betsy mixed my crystals, so I can't show it to you. But it also came with a face mask, like a mud face mask. It's called Bloomtown, the Clearing Black Clay and Tea Tree face mask, and it was one of those proper, like, ooh, look at the colour. Oh, it smells lovely. I haven't used any of these things because I keep them on the side so that I can show you. And it also came with some Sweetheart tea. And this is a tea with hawthorn, lemon balm, lime flower, dandelion, and rosehip. And what's nice about this is it comes in this bag of loose tea, but it also has a little muslin tea bag, so you can put how much you need, and it's reusable. That's clever, isn't it? I've not seen that before. It smells lovely. So I've got some tea. So it was another great box. I think that their boxes are amazing. They're not paying me to say that. I just am that way inclined. I'm going to finish up by talking to you about incense. Now, I have been into incense for a really long time, and I have never ever, up until about 3 or 4 years ago, never ever found the incense for me. And I'd been through a lot, and some incense sticks give me a headache, and some of them don't smell very nice, and some of them don't last very long. I've had all sorts of different experiences with them. However, I do love a house that smells of incense, or a shop that smells of incense. I love Glastonbury. I don't know if you've ever been to the town of Glastonbury, but pretty much every single shop that you go into in Glastonbury smells of incense, and I love it. I could spend all day there. Anyway, about 3 or 4 years ago, my cousin Katrina said to me, well, we went to her house and her house smelt delicious, and she had this incense, and I said to her, I need to know what it is. I absolutely love it. And this is the incense that she had. It's called Nag Champa. I'm pretty sure you've probably already heard of this brand. It's by a brand called Satya, and Nag Champa. Came home, bought 1 box of it, absolutely loved it, bought a box of 12, just the whole house has smelled of Nag Champa pretty much every day since that moment. And then about a few months ago, I was visiting my friend Victoria, and she told me that they also do it's the same brand, but they also do a type of incense called Superhit, and this is Superhit. And she said, oh, I think you'd like Superhit if you like Nag Champa. So, bought Superhit, and I brought it home and it was a super hit. Not sure if this might have taken over now from this. I'm not sure. I more often put this one on. Have got a 12 pack of Superhit as well. And then I was reading somewhere, someone had said that they were using a different Satcha incense, and I didn't know that they did so many other types. And so they do like a mixed box on Amazon of lots of their different types, and so I bought a mixed box, and I'm currently working my way through. So this is Positive Vibes, Spiritual Healing and Reiki. Positive Vibes, I've bought a 12 box already. It is insanely good. It's much more summery than Superhit or Nag Champa. And so I think that this one's going to get used. Oh, I just love it. This one's going to get used the most. But these two are also quite nice. Spiritual Healing and Reiki. Not as nice as Positive Vibes. And of course, because I'm now using this incense called Positive Vibes, something will happen in the house. Like yesterday when the boiler was being fitted, it was very stressful. I don't know if you're like this, but I can't stand having people in the house, especially not two buildery type men who spent all day working in the house with the front door open, freezing cold, pouring down with rain, and you feel like you have to tiptoe around everywhere and you can't go to the loo, or you feel awkward about going for a wee in case they hear you piddling, and I just can't stand it. Can't make a cup of tea without offering them one, and it was all very stressful. And when they finally left and the door shut, I was like, oh, thank goodness for that. Let me go and put some Positive Vibes on. Just endless opportunities to make that joke. Yeah, okay. Anyway, that's my incense story. I have got little incense dishes. I could talk to you about those for about half an hour because some of them work and some of them don't. And you really want an incense dish that catches all of the ash. But yeah, I have incense dishes all around the house. I'm not entirely sure how keen Darren is on incense. I don't think he's as keen as me. And he just puts up with it. He'd stiff upper lip, puts up with it. And it does make me laugh. Sometimes I don't realise how incensey my house smells until I go out. And then I come back in again. It's like, whoa. It smells like a hippie shop in here. Yay! That's what I'm looking for. That's the kind of vibe that I'm looking for my house. I want my house to smell like a hippie shop. Anyway, my loves, that's it for March. March Untangled. My falafels have got 1 minute, so my mind has switched over into lunchtime mode. And I really enjoyed filming this episode. I don't know when I'm going to get it edited and uploaded. Hopefully I'll get it done fairly soon. But I just wanted to say thank you for watching, and thank you to everybody who comments. And I feel like I'm kind of putting myself out there a bit with these episodes, but it's nice because then I'm meeting other people who are into the same kind of thing, and I think that that's a good thing. And yeah, I love reading your comments, and yeah, I hope that you all have a fabulous April and Easter and full moon, and Mercury in retrograde doesn't treat you too badly, and I will see you again at the end of April. Bye.